The battlefield was already lost. Fires burned through the last human stronghold on Verdun Prime, the once thriving colony now reduced to smoldering wreckage beneath an iron sky. The towering spires of the central city had collapsed, leaving jagged husks where glass and steel once stood. Dominion dropships loomed overhead, casting elongated shadows through the billowing smoke. The scent of charred bodies thickened the air, a grim testament to the battle's inevitable conclusion. General Threx of the Corel Dominion watched from atop a makeshift command platform, his bioengineered physique standing tall, muscles coiled within human strength. His black carapace armor gleamed under the flickering light of plasma fires, the symbol of Dominion supremacy etched across his chest. Around him, his warriors, 10-foot giants bred for war, moved in disciplined formations, their clawed hands slick with human blood. Resistance is broken. One of his subordinates rumbled, voice a guttural growl through a fanged mouth. Shall we begin the executions? Threx's mandibles twitched in amusement. Not yet. Let them witness their extinction. Let them know they were never meant to stand against us. Below, the remnants of the human defense force had retreated to the last holdout, a collapsed metro tunnel barely shielding them from orbital bombardment. Dozens of wounded soldiers huddled in the flickering emergency lights, their bodies wrapped in blood-stained bandages, their weapons nearly depleted. Lieutenant Hayes, the highest-ranking officer left, slumped against the tunnel wall, face gaunt with exhaustion. He clutched a radio, listening to the scrambled distress signals that had gone unanswered for hours. Command's gone. We're all that's left, one of the soldiers muttered. Hayes swallowed hard. They'll send reinforcements. Earth won't abandon us. The words rang hollow. The silence that followed was worse. Then, the radio crackled. A single phrase, low and distorted, cut through the static. The kill team is en route. Every soldier in the tunnel froze. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some thought it was a cruel trick, an enemy broadcast designed to give false hope before the final purge. But Hayes recognized the voice, the unmistakable, gravelly tone of Captain Dax Walker. Hope turned into something else, something darker. Threx tilted his head, his keen hearing catching the faint murmurs of human desperation. He let out a breath, savoring their helplessness. With a flick of his claw, he activated the command relay. Burn them out. The Karel forces advanced, their heavy footfalls shaking the earth. Plasma cannons hummed to life, the energy rippling through the air as they prepared to fire into the collapsed tunnels. A final cleansing. One last extermination. Then the first Karel warrior died. The shot came from nowhere. A single, silenced round punched clean through the soldier's skull, dropping him where he stood. Before his body hit the ground, another fell, throat sliced open by something unseen. The next died gurgling, his head twisted at an unnatural angle. Threx's amusement flickered. Report, he barked. No response. Only the wet sound of bodies collapsing. Something moved in the smoke, too fast to track. His soldiers turned, scanning the ruins with infrared optics, claws tightening around their rifles. A low, mechanical beeping echoed from the wreckage. Mines. A wall of concussive force erupted across the field, fire and shrapnel ripping through Dominion ranks. The disciplined formations dissolved into chaos. Karel soldiers roared in fury, firing blindly into the swirling dust. From the darkness, human shadows emerged. Captain Dax Walker moved like a phantom, his matte black armor blending seamlessly with the smoke. His rifle coughed a suppressed burst. 2 rounds, 2 kills. His blade followed, slicing through the throat of a soldier too slow to react. To his left, Grim Carter struck from the ruins, her combat knife flashing as she gutted an enemy mid-scream. Her movements were fluid, surgical, each kill delivered with chilling precision. She melted back into the wreckage before the Corel even knew she was there. O'Neill took the direct approach. His heavy weapon shattered, cutting down 3 warriors in a single burst. He was the hammer to Grimm's scalpel, his presence announced with brutal efficiency. The Corel, bred to dominate lesser species through sheer force, had never faced anything like this. They had studied human wars, had seen their crude, chaotic battles. But this was different. This was calculated slaughter. Threx snarled, his eyes darting through the haze. This wasn't war. This was a hunt. He keyed his command relay again. Pull back. Regroup. Nothing but static. Then Dax's voice, low and sharp, cut through the comms. You should have killed us faster. The transmission ended. Threx realized his mistake too late. His elite warriors, the terror of the Dominion, were being slaughtered like cattle. The battle was no longer his to control. For the first time in his long, blood-stained career, General Threx felt something unfamiliar coil in his chest. Fear. The nightmarish efficiency of a human strike team sent ripples of unease through the remaining Karel forces. They were apex predators, forged through centuries of war, yet the battlefield around them had turned into a slaughterhouse where they were the prey. Threx's mandibles clicked in agitation as he scanned the chaos. His warriors had begun firing wildly into the shadows, their disciplined formations unraveling beneath the relentless assault. He barked orders, attempting to restore control, but his commands were drowned beneath the screams of dying soldiers. Dax Walker and his team were ghosts, striking from blind angles, vanishing into the smoke before the enemy could react. The battlefield had become their hunting ground, and the Karel were bleeding out one by one. O'Neill moved through the wreckage, his heavy rifle spitting fire as he laid into a cluster of enemies retreating toward cover. A Dominion warrior turned to engage, raising his plasma cannon, but before he could fire, Grim Carter was there, silent as death, her blade slipping between the armor plates at the base of his skull. She wrenched it free, letting the lifeless body crumple to the ground before disappearing into the haze. Haze, still holed up in the metro tunnel, listened to the sounds of the battle shifting. The Karel had been so sure of their victory, but now their movements were erratic, uncertain. Their roars of dominance had turned to barks of alarm. He gritted his teeth, gripping his rifle. A wounded soldier beside him exhaled a shaky breath. They're actually turning the tide. Hayes nodded, but he knew better than to assume they had won. The Dominion weren't just warriors. They were warlords. A desperate beast was often the most dangerous. Threx came to the same conclusion. He flexed his clawed hands, rage simmering beneath his cold, tactical mind. These humans weren't just fighting back. They were dismantling his army. Enough. Threx activated his command channel, switching to a frequency reserved for Dominion war beasts. A series of ultrasonic pulses left his communicator, inaudible to human ears, but powerful enough to rattle the bones of his remaining soldiers. The signal carried a simple command: unleash the predators. The ground trembled as containment cells aboard the Dominion warship disengaged, and massive drop pods fired toward the surface. These were no mere reinforcements. They were the Dominion's most lethal bioengineered hunters, nightmare creatures built for extermination. Dax felt it before he saw them. The shift in the battle, the silence that crept over the ruins. Even the dying Karel warriors seemed to sense it, their bodies tensing as something primal stirred in the air. Then the first one landed. The pod cracked open like an egg, and something wrong crawled out. 8 feet tall, its elongated body was covered in shifting plates of biosteel, its multiple arms tipped with curved, obsidian talons. It had no eyes, only a gaping maw that split its head in half, rows of needle-like teeth pulsing with hunger. More landed in quick succession. The battlefield, already a nightmare, took a turn for the worse. Dax barely had time to react before one lunged at him, impossibly fast for its size. He dodged at the last second, feeling the wind from its strike graze his armor. He rolled into a crouch, raising his rifle, but before he could fire, the creature disappeared. Not vanished, just shifted, its form flickering like a mirage before reappearing 5 feet to his left. Shit! It struck again, and Dax barely managed to block with his forearm. The impact sent him skidding backward, his armor denting under the force. The thing was strong. Too strong. Contact! He barked into his comms. New hostiles. Cloakers with speed enhancements. Across the battlefield, the tide shifted once again. The kill team had been carving through the Dominion forces like a scalpel, but these things were a different breed. One moment, O'Neill was laying down, covering fire. The next, a creature materialized behind him, swinging a talon at his exposed flank. He twisted, barely dodging, and emptied half a magazine into its torso. The bullet struck, but the thing didn't slow down. Grim, fast as she was, had met her match. One of the creatures mirrored her movements, flickering in and out of existence as they circled each other. She slashed low, aiming for its legs, but it shifted at the last second, appearing behind her with a guttural hiss. She barely rolled away in time. "This is bad," O'Neill growled. "How the hell do we kill these things?" Dax gritted his teeth. He'd fought aliens, super soldiers, insurgents, every breed of nightmare war could throw at him. But these creatures weren't just warriors. They were weapons, crafted for a singular purpose. Threx watched from a safe distance, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. The humans had been terrifying in their efficiency, but against his war beasts, they were nothing more than dying embers waiting to be snuffed out. One of the creatures lunged at Dax again, its claws slashing toward his throat. This time he didn't dodge. Instead, he met it head-on. He sidestepped at the last second, twisting his body and driving his combat knife deep into the creature's side. The reaction was immediate. The thing screeched, not in pain, but in surprise. Its body shimmered, glitching out for a brief moment before it recoiled. Dax's eyes flicked to the blade, now coated in a strange, viscous fluid. Not invulnerable, just resistant. "Go for the joints," he barked. "Armor's too dense everywhere else." The team adapted instantly. Grim feinted left, baiting her opponent into shifting positions. The second it did, she pivoted, driving her blade into the seam between its shoulder plates. The creature spasmed, its cloaking field flickering erratically before she twisted the knife and severed something important. It collapsed with a sickening thud. O'Neill switched tactics as well. Instead of center mass shots, he aimed for the legs, blasting apart the thinner armor at the knees. The thing stumbled, and he finished it with a point-blank burst to the throat. The kill team adjusted, countering the monsters with ruthless precision. Would have been a desperate scramble turned into something else, an execution. Threx's satisfaction soured as he watched his creatures falter. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The war beasts were designed to overwhelm, to annihilate. But these humans were learning, adapting mid-fight. Unacceptable. He switched frequencies again. Activate the Annihilator. The Karel around him froze. Even among his kind, the name carried weight. Fear. In the ruins below, Dax and his team had just finished off the last of the bio-horrors when a deep, seismic tremor rolled through the battlefield. Dust trickled from the broken structures, and even the fires seemed to dim as something massive approached. Then they saw it. The Dominion warship's central drop pod split open, releasing a towering, monstrous form. Threx's real weapon. A creature that dwarfed the others, its entire body encased in pulsating armor, reinforced with Dominion war tech. Its limbs bristled with weaponry, and its head was wrong. An amalgamation of Karel and war beast fused into something wholly unnatural. Dax clenched his jaw. "This just got worse," Grim murmured. The Annihilator stepped forward, and the ground cracked beneath its weight. Its voice, if it could be called that, reverberated through the ruins, a distorted amalgamation of screams and static. Then it charged, and the real fight began. The Annihilator moved with terrifying purpose. Every footfall sent tremors rippling through the shattered remains of the battlefield, its massive form casting long, jagged shadows in the firelit ruins. Unlike the war beasts that had come before, this thing radiated something far worse than brutality, intent. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a predator that understood its prey. Dax barely had time to react before the first attack came. The creature didn't lunge or swipe wildly. It calculated. Its right arm, a grotesque fusion of organic muscle and high-density plasma emitters, pulsed once before releasing a blast of searing blue energy. The shot was precise, meant to cut off an escape route rather than kill outright. Dax twisted away, rolling behind the skeletal remains of a collapsed transport. The plasma strike hit a second later, vaporizing the metal in an instant, sending molten slag hissing into the air. If he'd been a second slower, he wouldn't have dodged. He'd have ceased to exist. "Eyes up. This one's got a brain," he barked in his comms. O'Neill took position atop a broken scaffold, his rifle locked onto the behemoth's exposed joints. He squeezed the trigger, sending a precise burst into what should have been a vulnerable spot, only for the rounds to stop. The bullet struck an invisible field, rippling the air in a distorted shimmer before dropping harmlessly to the ground. "Son of a, it's got shielding." The Annihilator turned toward O'Neill, tilting its monstrous head as if acknowledging him. Then, with a single, thunderous leap, it crossed the entire battlefield. O'Neill barely had time to react before the thing crashed down atop the scaffold. The force of its landing sent a shockwave outward, snapping the metal structure like brittle bones. O'Neill flung himself backward, rolling as the entire platform collapsed in a tangled heap of debris. The Annihilator struck again, this time with its left arm. The limb extended unnaturally, organic sinew unraveling like a whip, tipped with a serrated, obsidian blade. It scythed through the air, nearly bisecting O'Neill before he rolled away, panting. "Jesus," he muttered. Grim and Carter flanked the beast, moving in tandem. They struck with precision, Grim going low, Carter going high. Carter's blade flashed as she drove it toward the base of the thing's skull, while Grim aimed for the exposed tissue near its knees. Neither strike landed. The creature twisted with horrifying speed, its armor plates shifting mid-motion. It anticipated their attacks, adjusting its defenses on the fly. Its body contorted, slamming into Carter with bone-crushing force, sending her sprawling across the rubble. Grim barely managed to disengage, her knife carving a shallow gouge across the monster's shifting plates, little more than a scratch. Dax swore under his breath. The damn thing was learning faster than they were. The team fell back, regrouping behind a crumbling archway. The Annihilator didn't pursue, not immediately. It remained where it was, tilting its grotesque head as if considering them. Threx watched the battle unfold from his command post, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The human strike team had been a thorn in his side for too long, cutting through his forces with infuriating efficiency. But against this, they had no answer. "You fought well," he murmured into the open channel, allowing his voice to carry to the battlefield below. "But this is the end of your defiance. The Annihilator does not falter. It does not weaken. It adapts. You cannot win." Dax exhaled sharply, watching the creature as it began its slow, deliberate advance. "Walker," Grim said, voice tight, "this thing isn't just strong. It's evolving every second we fight it. Our usual tactics won't cut it." Dax nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Then we stop playing by its rules." O'Neill frowned. "What are you thinking?" "That shield, it only activates when it senses a high-velocity projectile. It stopped your rifle rounds, but Grimm's knife? It connected. Barely, but it did. Grimm's eyes narrowed. Close combat. Dax nodded. Close combat. It was insane. But insanity was a human specialty. The team spread out, forcing the Annihilator to track multiple targets at once. Grimm moved first, darting left, while Carter mirrored her on the right. O'Neill provided suppressive fire, not to damage, but to distract. The beast flicked its shield on instinctively, ripples shimmering across its body as it absorbed the gunfire. That was the opening. Dax ran straight at it. The Annihilator reacted instantly, its whip arm snapping toward him. He ducked, feeling the blade slice just above his head. Then he was inside its guard. No bullets, no ranged attacks, just steel and muscle. He jammed his combat knife up, aiming for the joint beneath its plated ribs. The blade sank in, deeper than before. Not much, but enough. The creature spasmed, its shielding faltering as it tried to recalibrate. Grimm was already there. She twisted her body mid-air, flipping over its shoulder, her own blade flashing in the dim light. She plunged it into the seam where its head met its back, twisting hard. The Annihilator let out a noise, something almost like a laugh, but broken, distorted. It staggered, its movements glitching, as if its body couldn't process the simultaneous hits. That was when Carter made her move. She didn't go for precision. She went for brutality. She vaulted onto its back, gripping Grimm's embedded knife for leverage, and then drove her own blade straight into its exposed throat, yanking it sideways with all her strength. The flesh tore. The sound was sickening. The creature reeled, shrieking. Its whip arm flailed wildly, trying to dislodge her. Carter held on. O'Neill saw his opening. He switched to incendiary rounds and fired a single, perfect shot into the gash in its armor. The bullet detonated. The explosion wasn't large, but it didn't need to be. It hit something vital, something deep inside. The Annihilator's entire body convulsed, its plates shifting erratically as internal systems misfired. Carter leapt free just as the thing collapsed onto its knees. It twitched once, twice. Then, slowly, it stopped moving. Silence. The battlefield was still. The Dominion forces that remained hesitated, their confidence shattered. Frex's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The impossible had happened. Dax exhaled, stepping back from the corpse. That was too close. Grimm wiped blood from her face. It's dead. Carter grinned, still catching her breath. Damn right it is. But then, a deep, guttural hum filled the air. The Annihilator's corpse shuddered. The glow in its eyes flickered, then ignited, brighter than before. Dax's stomach dropped. No. The ground beneath them split apart as something larger, stirred beneath the ruins. Then the real horror began. The battlefield trembled. What should have been a corpse, would have been a corpse, was stirring, but not in any natural way. The Annihilator's remains twitched, shuddering as something deep within it pulsed with renewed energy. The dim glow of its eyes, which had flickered like dying embers, ignited into a searing inferno. The fractures in its armor fused together, the flesh knitting itself back into something stronger. The broken machine was rebuilding itself. Dax felt cold horror spread through his chest. They had thrown everything they had at it, exploited every weakness, and it still wasn't enough. This thing wasn't just learning, it was evolving past them. Fall back, he barked. O'Neill didn't hesitate. He grabbed Carter, who was still regaining her footing, and hauled her away from the growing storm of energy that erupted around the creature. Grimm vaulted off the shattered remains of a fallen column, landing beside them as they scrambled for cover. The Annihilator rose. But it wasn't just the Annihilator anymore. The ground beneath it cracked open, and from the fissures, something else emerged, dark, pulsing tendrils of obsidian-colored metal and sinew, writhing with intelligence, with hunger. The creature's form expanded, its plates shifting into something more jagged, more predatory. Its once humanoid silhouette stretched into something grotesque, something meant for butchery. And then it spoke, not with words, not in any language, but with a sound, a guttural, vibrating resonance that drilled into the skull like a pressure wave. It was a communication beyond speech, something felt more than heard. You cannot win. The voice wasn't mechanical. It wasn't even alien. It was something other, something that had studied them not as warriors, but as prey. Dax gritted his teeth, forcing down the primal terror gnawing at the edges of his mind. "O'Neill," he said, his voice sharp, focused. "We need to hit it with everything." O'Neill nodded, but there was hesitation in his eyes. "Walker, I'm running low. The incendiaries barely scratched it last time. What if? We don't think about what if," Dax snapped. "We end this. Right here. Right now." Carter wiped blood from her mouth, stepping forward with a grim smile. "Then let's give it hell." Grim had already moved. She didn't wait for orders. She saw an opening and took it. Sprinting across the rubble-strewn battlefield, she used the ruined landscape as a launch pad, bounding from one shattered structure to another with impossible speed. She closed the distance before the creature could fully adjust. It swung at her. This time, the strike wasn't calculated. It was instinctual. She dodged, sliding under its outstretched limb. She planted both feet against a slab of concrete and propelled herself upward. Her blade flashed, this time not for precise stab, but for destruction. She drove the blade deep into its left shoulder joint and wrenched sideways, forcing the plates apart. The Annihilator staggered. Dax and Carter were already moving. Carter tossed Dax a grenade, her fingers dancing over her own belt as she armed another. "Go for the core," she shouted. Dax didn't question it. He sprinted, pushing his muscles past exhaustion. The creature was fast, but it was still adjusting to its new form. It hadn't perfected itself yet. They still had a window. The Annihilator pivoted, trying to swat Dax aside, but O'Neill let loose another barrage from his rifle. The kinetic rounds didn't penetrate, but they forced the creature's shielding to flicker, to split its attention. Dax used the opening. He dove forward, slamming the grenade into the exposed fissure where Grim had pried apart its armor. He didn't stop to check if it stuck. He just ran. "Now!" he roared. Carter threw hers. The explosion was blinding. A shockwave ripped through the battlefield, sending debris flying in every direction. The Annihilator reeled, its form convulsing, twisting upon itself as the energy within it destabilized. But it wasn't dead. Dax's stomach twisted. Even after all that, it was still standing. Then he saw Grim. She was already in motion, her knife spinning in her hand, her expression unreadable. She didn't hesitate, didn't slow. She climbed the thing, grabbing onto the jagged edges of its broken plating. She hauled herself up its convulsing body, dodging wild, desperate swings. The Annihilator was panicking. For the first time, it wasn't adapting, it was reacting. She reached the top, standing on its shoulders like a phantom of death. And then, with one final brutal motion, she drove her blade straight through the base of its skull. The Annihilator froze. The light in its eyes flickered. And then it collapsed. It didn't explode. It didn't scream. It just died. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, from the ruined command post overlooking the battlefield, a broken, chittering sound crackled through the comms. Threx, the once proud commander, reduced to desperation. "Impossible," he whispered. "You, humans, you are." Dax grabbed his rifle, turned toward the command post, and fired a single shot. The comms cut to static. The war was over. Dax exhaled, his body sagging. Carter let out a breathless laugh, slumping against a piece of rubble. O'Neill sat down heavily, running a hand through his sweat-matted hair. Grim just stood there, staring at the corpse of the monster she had slain. They had won, not because they were stronger, not because they were faster, but because they refused to break. Dax looked at his team, the last remnants of humanity's finest, and let out a slow, weary grin. Let's go home.